Hello, we are Group 19 and we will be talking about active constructive responding. So to go on to the first slide, we will be talking about what is active constructive responding. So active constructive responding refers to how one responds to an individual when sharing good news or information. The response is shown with clear enthusiasm and interest in the individual's information. The response is typically followed with a question to understand how the individual feels when sharing and helps them re-experience the moment. So for example, let's say someone shares good news with you. You could say, "Wow, that's amazing. I am so proud of you. Tell me how you felt when you found out." Active constructive responding is not to be confused with active destructive responding. This refers to actively pointing out problems in the individual's good news or information. So, for example, this can be, "Wow, are you sure you want to do that? I'm not sure you have considered the risks." Now we'll be talking about why is it important to study. So the importance is there are many benefits to utilizing active constructive responding when speaking with a partner, friend, family member, or general person. It's important to study because it helps to understand how a person feels when sharing and demonstrates genuine support. Active constructive responding validates not only of what the person has to say, but also the relationship with them as well. So some personal benefits include increased positive emotions, increased subjective well-being, increased self-esteem, and decreased loneliness. And some relationship benefits include increased relationship slash marital satisfaction, increased intimacy, increased commitment, increased trust, liking, and closeness, and lastly, increased stability.
Next, I will be discussing two important ACR studies that show how supportive responses from other people about our own good news affect our relationships and emotional well-being. One of the most famous ACR studies was from Dr. Shelley Gable and her team in 2004. She focused on this idea of capitalization, which basically means sharing good news with other people. Her and her team wanted to find out if sharing good news with people and receiving supportive responses could help with strengthening our relationships, and if the responses plays a role in the relationship's trust, intimacy, and satisfaction. The study found that when we share good news with supportive people, we experience more happiness, more positive emotions, and greater life satisfaction. ACR had the strongest positive effect on the participants' relationships. Active constructive responses were positively associated with better relationship quality, while passive constructive, active destructive, and passive destructive responses were negatively associated with relationship quality. There was far more intimacy, stronger trust, and higher relationship satisfaction in relationships with responses that were enthusiastic, engaged and validating. On the other hand, when people lacked enthusiasm and lacked interest in their partner's good news, there was a negative effect on the relationship quality. Quiet responses like, "Oh, that's nice," did not have as many positive benefits compared to energetic and emotionally engaged reactions. Their study concluded that positive and constructive communication helped build emotional closeness and stronger social connections. The second study was done by Woods, and they aimed to find out whether ACR would improve relationship satisfaction and feelings of support within romantic relationships. They found that participants in the experimental group who received ACR training felt more gratitude toward their partners and perceived them more positively after receiving supportive responses. The positive reactions made them more emotionally supported and appreciated. However, they also found that ACR was not able to increase overall relationship satisfaction during a short-term study period. The researchers suggested that this could be because relationship stability and satisfaction are difficult to change over a short amount of time. In conclusion, the Wood study found that ACR increased gratitude and improved people's perception of their relationships, even though broader relationship satisfaction may require more time to change. What research methods are commonly used? One major method that researchers use is self-reported questionnaires. A common example is the PRCA, or the Perceived Responses to Capitalization Attempts, which measures how people respond when someone shares good news. There are four types of responses. Active constructive is considered the healthiest response because it includes asking engaging questions, showing genuine enthusiasm, and celebrating their accomplishments. Second is the passive constructive responding, where the person is supportive but their responses are understated without much follow-up. Third is the active destructive responding, where the listener minimizes the good news and they find problems with your success. Finally, passive destructive responding is when the listener ignores your good news, they seem uninterested, and then they shift the attention back to themselves. Wood study used an experimental intervention study. The researchers used an experimental design with a control and experimental group. Experimental groups were trained to respond enthusiastically and supportively to their partner's good news. Then they measured the outcomes like gratitude and relationship satisfaction using questionnaires. Gable's research used surveys and daily diary methods such as the Rochester interaction record, where they reported their daily positive experiences and how others responded to them. These studies were mainly correlational, meaning the researchers looked at the relationship between response styles and outcomes like happiness, trust, and relationship satisfaction. They also used dyadic couple research methods, which is where both partners are studied together, which helps researchers understand how interactions affect both of them. Finally, other studies use behavioral observation tasks and lab capitalization paradigms. In a controlled setting, the researchers would directly observe how people respond to each other's good news.
Hi there, my name is Sophia, and I'll be going over the strengths and limitations of the current research on active constructive responding. We'll begin with the strengths. The first one is that there's broad application and relevance. This research is a broad community health resource, as it supports the effectiveness of active constructive responding across various settings. This makes it highly applicable in romantic partnerships, parent child dynamics, corporate team building, classrooms, and more. So, this just tells us that the research is very necessary because it supports active constructive responding in a multitude of useful scenarios. The next strength is that it's easily discernible in research settings. One research strategy that is used is daily diary and experience sampling. Participants track conversations, writing what news they shared, how their partner responded, and the resulting feelings. This methodology helped researchers categorize responding into four distinct styles: active constructive, passive constructive, active destructive, and passive destructive. These styles are so well defined that analyzing the results of active constructive responding is simplified. Now we'll be moving on to the limitations of current research. The first is measurement. Much of the data relies on self reported surveys, which are often subject to social desirability bias. Participants have the tendency to view their own communication skills favorably, so in this way, self report surveys are not always the most accurate form of data collection. This has been seen in many of the presentations we've been watching. The weakness with a lot of the public health research is self report surveys. They do have benefits, but in a case like this, it's not always the most beneficial. The second limitation is demographics. The earliest research of financial studies, such as that of Dr. Shelley Gable, heavily relied on Western, educated, and largely female skewing samples. This limits the cross cultural generalizability of active constructive responding and analysis of how different cultures express excitement or enthusiasm. And the final limitation of the current research is context. Existing models often have a difficult time capturing situational variabilities. For example, research rarely explores how factors like unequal power dynamics, fatigue, or the specific magnitude of news affects a person's response to good news. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jolene Caseway, and I'll be reviewing the implications surrounding active constructive responses. Upon researching this topic, I found that there was three main implications. The first one being stronger relationships. Research heavily supported that ACR increases trust, intimacy, and emotional closeness in relationships. It's said that celebrating wins together with other people reinforces those connections. People often judge relationships' quality not only by support during difficult times, but how others respond to their successes. The second one I found to be really important was that it increases your well being. ACR has proven to improve happiness, self esteem, and optimism. When people feel their achievements are recognized, positive emotions are amplified. And then lastly, the third one is that it improves your communication style. ACR promotes attentive listening, empathy, and emotional responsiveness. Over time, it creates communication habits that make interactions feel safer and more affirming. This is especially important in romantic relationships and parent child relationships as well. Overall, the broader implications of ACR is that how people respond to success can shape relationship qualities just as much as support during hardship. It highlights the social importance of validation, shared joy, and emotional presence in everyday interactions. I was also tasked with finding the future research questions that could be explored. Um, I'm incredibly excited to discuss this with everyone, and I'm interested to hear everyone else's thoughts and opinions on it. But the first question being, how might active constructive responding differ in cultures that don't prioritize or value emotional vulnerability slash expressiveness? I think this question directly challenges whether or not active constructive responding is a universally beneficial communication style or a culturally specific model rooted in Western ideals of emotional openness and individual validation. For example, I come from an immigrant household, a West African household to be specific, one in which emotional openness wasn't highly suggested or supported. Rather, my parents often showed their love and their appreciation for us through their actions rather than vocally. And although at times it was frustrating, I still do believe that I was raised in a loving and supportive household. So I'm interested to see if active constructive responding is something that is beneficial for everyone and that it's something that should be adopted by all households, or if it's only really beneficial for Western households that do prioritize emotional openness. The second question I think is really important, is whether or not public validation on social media is as meaningful and impactful as private active constructive responding. Does it carry the same weight psychologically? This question introduces a broader conversation surrounding the usage of social media and how digital interactions shape and determine the relationships that we have with other people. For example, right now we're currently in grad season. We're seeing a lot of graduates posting their grad pictures, and people are very quick to comment, "Congratulations, I am so proud of you." But it is very rare that we will open up our phones to text that person privately and share our pride for their accomplishment. And I'm interested to see whether or not social media has had a negative impact on. I'm interested to see whether or not social media has had a negative impact on our relationships with other people. A third research question I think would be really interesting to explore is whether there's an optimal level of enthusiasm before responses start to feel disingenuous or inauthentic. For example, throughout this presentation, we've touched on how it is important to show enthusiasm when our friends are telling us about their successes. But when does it become a level of when does it start to feel disingenuous or as though we are acting when we are responding to these successes? So that's something I'm also interested to hear more about.
Now I'll be talking about my personal experience. So my name is Alex, and for my section, I wrote, my roommate does equestrian horse riding, and she recently had a competition where she went first. It was a really special moment for her, and I'm glad I got to be there to support. After her competition, I told her, "Amazing job, you must feel so proud." Her face then lit up with pure joy, and I could tell she felt truly proud of herself. Using active constructive responding when a friend or family member shares news that they feel good about is important to not only their well-being, but contributes to mine as well.
Hello, this is Shatane, and I'm going to be sharing my ACR experience at work. I was in the middle of a busy dinner service when my coworker, who was an IVC student at the time, received the good news that she got accepted to UCI as a transfer student. Rather than simply saying, "Oh, that's nice, that's good," and continuing on with my work, I stopped and congratulated her with the biggest smile on my face and immediately asked her if she was planning on dorming or commuting since I was genuinely excited for her to attend UCI. I offered my help informing her of free printing resources around the campus, which study spots are the best, if the Ant Eatery or Brandywine had better food, and she was generally happy to be receiving all the information. ACR was able to improve our previously awkward work relationship and made it easier for us to communicate with one another effectively.
Her sister recently started to receive decisions from master programs about whether or not she had gotten accepted into them. There was one in particular she was incredibly hopeful and excited for. Although it was highly competitive, I believe it was an Ivy League. One day she told me and my other sister that she got waitlisted from the program. Our immediate reaction was joy, and we immediately told her, "Wow, that is so awesome to even be considered. That it shows that they must have really liked something from her application." Rather than shutting her down and offering her pity, we uplifted her in that moment.
Hi there, this is Sophia, and I'll be sharing my personal experience. So, an experience I had with the positive impact of active constructive responding took place in a conversation with my mom. I was excited to tell her that I had received a promotion at my job, and instead of her responding with something like, "I'm happy for you, but do you have time for more work?" which would have been an active destructive response, pointing out the negatives, not really giving any enthusiasm for the person telling you good news, she was actually incredibly enthusiastic and excited for me with absolutely no reservations. So to me, this just showed how active constructive responding could have a positive impact on my life. And thank you.